Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The chief executive of the Go-Ahead Group, which operates the troubled Southern Rail franchise, has insisted the firm doesn't make any money out of the line, despite booking annual profits of almost £100 million. Passengers have suffered months of delays and cancellations because of a dispute over changes to the role of conductors. Next week, to add to their misery, hundreds of thousands of commuters on Southern Rail will endure yet more strikes. So what do they make of it all? Paul McNamara has been finding out.
It's been a tough summer on Southern Rail, but today things are looking up. Well, for the owners at least. Yesterday, the government announced a £20 million fund to sort the problems on its network. Less than 24 hours later, the company that part owns the rail firm announced profits of nearly £100 million.
How much are they making?
£100 million.
Yeah, that's insane.
What was the service like this morning?
Pretty good, really.
Is it always like that?
No.
Well, it was 12 minutes late, so that counts as being on time. Pretty close. Yesterday was 35 minutes late, so 12 is almost 3 times as good, isn't it?
So this morning, the parent company announced profits of about £100 million.
OK, that's well done by them.
Happy about that?
Well, I like to see companies making a profit. I'd like to see them deliver a timely service as well as that. So I think the two should sort of be linked.
After months of delays and cancellations, in July Southern cancelled more than 300 daily services. And last month, union members walked out for 3 days in a row over removing conductors from trains.
So despite a summer of bad publicity and industrial action, the company that owns 65% of Southern Trains, the Go-Ahead Group, has still seen profits rise by 27% to £99.8 million. Unions say just a fraction of that is all that's needed to keep conductors on trains, to end any future strikes, and most importantly, make life just a little bit better for commuters.
And for those unions, the £20 million fund from government is beyond believable.
Well, you couldn't make it up, can you? One day, the government give them £20 million to improve services. The next day, they announce £100 million worth of profits. Wouldn't you have thought one person would have said, well, if you've got £100 million, well, use that to improve the services. Spend that rather than give it to shareholders. So there's something's gone wrong with the way the franchise is operating.
Southern is part of Govia Thameslink, which is just one arm of the Go-Ahead Group empire. They also own 2 other train companies in the UK, London Midland and South Eastern. But it's buses that are Go-Ahead's real golden goose, with 8 companies from Durham to Dorset and much of the country in between.
The buses that are actually the really profitable part of that business. The margins on buses, you're looking at about 12%, whereas on rail, you're only looking at just over 2%. So the idea that we could somehow cut fares if only these companies weren't making profit it just doesn't really hold water, I'm afraid.
Go-Ahead insists Govia Thameslink and Southern make no profit and are subsidised by their other businesses. Government insists the rail firm is striving to deliver a better service. Unions insist more strikes down the line.
Well, joining me now to discuss whether Theresa May's new government is undaunted by the prospect of taking on the unions is the Conservative MP Chris Philp, whose South Croydon constituents have been badly affected by that Southern Rail strike, and Labour frontbench MP Catherine West. I'm also joined by the newly elected co-leader of the Greens, Jonathan Bartley, in Birmingham. Chris Philp first. Let me put it to you that the government wants to smash the unions, break the unions, however you want to describe it, and they're siding with the bosses.
There is no desire at all to break the unions. Trade unions have a long and proud history of standing up for workers and representing them when they're getting oppressed. But what we've seen in the last few months from the RMT union on Southern is nothing like that. They have concocted a dispute about who opens and shuts the doors. There is no evidence there's any safety problem, there's no pay cut, no staff losses. They're inflicting misery on my constituents for no reason at all.
Well, is it when you look at the transport dispute and the health dispute, Jeremy Hunt basically has gone to war with the junior doctors. Chris Grayling, according to the unions, won't talk to them. It does very much look like the government's rather relishing the confrontation.
Look, there is no relish, but there is a desire to make sure basic services get provided. I mean, Jeremy Hunt compromised with the junior doctors last May. The BMA themselves accepted the compromise, and now, 3 months later, they're going on strike, which is ridiculous. And on the railways, as I said, every single job is being guaranteed. Nobody's pay is being cut, the proposals are safe, and yet the militant RMT are insisting on inflicting misery on my constituents and me.
Catherine West, many passengers are fed up with the RMT action. How much longer before they get fed up with the junior doctors too?
Well, I think in the Southern case, the 20 million which the Secretary of State for Transport's just given to the company, which earned 100 million and whose chief executive is paid over 2 million each year, I think we just have to get the balance right, because that 20 million really should be paid to customers and to consumers, people who buy their tickets every day and who feel ripped off that they're not getting a good deal.
Straight to Chris Philp, that 20 million, you know, 100 million profits, the government, instead of taking the franchise away, hands out another 20 million.
Well, by the way, the £20 million is mostly going on track improvements, and those are dealt with by Network Rail. So it's not correct to say the money is being given to Southern Railway. It categorically is not. It's being spent on infrastructure improvements. But I do think it's wrong they're making a £100 million profit while residents in my neighbourhood are suffering. And I think
so they should give that back to
Well, I think that
passengers?
£100 million should be spent on investing in services, in addition to the 20 million. And I think GTR have done a very bad job running the franchise, but the RMT are to blame as well.
So, Catherine West, do you think the franchise should be taken away? Is that what a Labour government would do?
Well, I think when franchises come up, it should be looked at that possibly a public provider could provide that service as well, so that we can enhance the competition, because often what we find with the franchises is that there's only one company who will do it, whereas if we said that nationalisation is an option, then there would be an enhanced sense of competition so that we get a better deal.
Well, let me bring in Jonathan Bartley now. Whose side are you on? And do you side with Labour or the Tories here, the unions, the passengers, the patients? Where are you?
We're on the side of working people. You know, I'm a regular user of Southern Thameslink. I've just spent 4 weeks in hospital with my son, working with junior doctors. You know what? I trust the junior doctors to be the best judges of whether their environments are insecure or not. I trust the workers on the railways to know whether it's going to be detrimental to passengers. My son, you know, as a wheelchair user, is going to have a problem using railways when there aren't enough people to help him on and off the train. This is about real life. It's about real people's pay and wages. And what we've seen since 2007 has been a public sector pay freeze, or a very small incremental increase for public sector workers. Meanwhile, we've seen real wages right across the board. You know, a lot of people aren't union members, but those people who are union members and those who aren't, workers, real people that we're talking about, have lost track. They are struggling. A third of homeowners, you know, are risking losing their homes from just a month's paycheck away. This is an age of insecurity which we have to address.
So isn't it a failure of the left, including the Greens? You say you want a progressive alliance with Labour. Isn't it a failure of the left broadly that the government can basically be quite heavy-handed on this dispute?
No, there's only one group of people that have failed in this, and that's the government. And there's a whole larger group of people that are being failed, and that is ordinary working people. And there's been an assault over the last 30 years, and I think, yes, let's put our hands up. There has been a failure on the left to defend the unions, and we haven't appreciated actually how important the work of unions is. When you get wage growth, the economy prospers, the economy becomes stronger, we all prosper. But actually, let's not lose sight of the fact that there have been fewer strike days lost recently. In fact, we're at a record low in terms of days lost in terms of strikes. But wage growth has slowed. So we need to actually be focusing on what's important, getting that wage growth up. We all benefit from it, real people will benefit from it, and it is the government that's failing, not working people.
Chris Philp, does the government now need to cool it on both hospitals and the rail network? Or are they going to up the ante?
Well, I think the government should make sure the reforms that are needed are implemented. In the case of the trains, it'll make the train operation actually safer and more efficient. No one's going to lose their job, so the people that were opening and closing the doors can help Jonathan's son. And in the case of the health service, a 7-day NHS is safer. But on
so they're going to fight this to the end, you think?
Look, I think they should stick to their guns, because what they're doing is in the interests of patients and passengers, and they should not give in to militant unions. But on that wage point Jonathan just made, you know, wages are now growing at over 2%, inflation is 0, and the government just a few weeks ago, in April of this year, introduced an 11% year-on-year increase in the minimum wage. So this is a government that has stood up for ordinary working people on low incomes, and I'm proud to have voted for the biggest ever minimum wage increase as a Conservative.
Well, I think it's interesting that we're thinking about what the government's done. The government has allowed the prices of trains and train journeys to increase exponentially. The price of going to work by train has gone up by about 25% since 2010. And these days, with wages flat, 25% increase, as well as your childcare going up, as well as now the prices going up because of Brexit in the shops. You know, when is this going to stop?
Well, let me put that to Jonathan Bartley, because you and Catherine West are sounding remarkably similar. Why don't you just join the Corbynistas?
Well, no, we're thrilled that Labour is moving in our direction. We're very flattered that they're taking on some of our policies, and we are open to working with them. But, you know, we are distinct, and we're also united.
Well, are you, though? Because haven't Labour just seized all your policies, really?
Well, you know, I wish they would seize our policy on electoral reform. There are plenty of places where we aren't in agreement. But, you know, no one has a monopoly on wisdom. We're willing to work with anyone who shares the values, who's on the side of working people. You know, we're not precious about this, but we need to see a united Labour Party, and we need to see them working with other parties. We need to move past the tribalism. And I think when parties do recognise that, when they're prepared to put perhaps their narrow tribal interests aside, then we will see a better future for Britain, a better future for the left in Britain. We're open to that. You know, let's see Labour come forward and do it.
You helped get John Major elected. It's a long journey you've taken from the Tories.
It's a very long journey. Yeah, in 1995 I just
Probably on
finished...
Southern Rail.
I just left the London School of Economics, and I was working in Parliament on a cross-party basis. I've never been tribal myself. I did work for Major. It was good experience, but you know what? I am so far away from where the Tories are now and where they were then. And actually, it was having contact with people, ordinary working people, and those within the disabled movement. 10 million disabled people in this country who don't get a voice, who are trying to use the trains that aren't accessible, who are going to be hit by the fact that there won't be more staff on Southern Rail. These are the people who really matter. These are the people that I am standing with, and that's why I'm a member of the Green Party.
Catherine West, would you welcome Jonathan Bartley back? Sounds a bit like a Corbynista to me.
Well, I think Jonathan could join Labour. He's been in the Tory party, the Green Party. He could join Labour. But I think what's important is the group that I've been working in Parliament on Europe post the 23rd of June. We've got support from the only Green parliamentarian. We've got support from Plaid Cymru. We've got support from... We've invited Tory members. We're hoping that they'll come along when we have our meeting next. And I think it's really important that in Parliament we work together very closely to try and get the best approach next, and you know, make sure that we work together on the things which really do matter.
Catherine West, Chris Philp and Jonathan Bartley, thank you very much for joining me.
I've been getting away